Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another edition of the Mandatory Live. Thank you so much for rocking with us. If you like the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Also, follow us on our social media channels. We're at the Mandatory TKO. Lots to get into, of course. If you saw our cover photo, then you know that we are going to preview I think one of the most anticipated fights of this year and might go down as the fight of the year. David Benavidez and David Morrell, the battle of the Morrells. The card is absolutely stellar as well. We are going to get into the undercard as well. So please drop your comments because we are going to get into all of that as well. And by the way, we're on the audio side as well. So if you got a couple of minutes, please leave a rate and review because it helps the channel grow. Bryan, you know what? We got a big list of things that we got to get through. So why don't we just start talking about this fight right now? David Benavidez versus David Morrell. I'm going to take a look at the odds. And you know what? I'm actually not mad at these odds. One prominent sports book has David Benavidez as a minus 190 and David Morrell as a plus 155. Bryan, your thoughts on the line for this? And we'll preview the fight and then obviously give our predictions. But your thoughts on the line just from seeing it first.
It's pretty fair given the resumes, the body of work. Like this is the main thing that a lot of people are going to be talking about as it relates to this fight. Or one of the main things, not the main thing. One of the main things people are going to be talking about is just Dave Benavidez is more proven. He's been in our lives longer. He's been at least an interim champion, and he has really like the tools to stop a guy like David Morrell. But I think David Morrell also has the tools to give Dave Benavidez some problems. This is why I think this is, if not a 50-50 fight, it's a 55-45. Like it's damn close. I think David Morrell has a real shot, but I don't mind him being the underdog because of what we've seen leading up to this. Even though like you get into the most recent performances, one of the most interesting things to me about this, Shantelle, is that both guys are coming off of kind of underwhelming performances where we saw them make jumps from 168 to 175. We saw them go from super middleweight to light heavyweight, but then David Morrell struggles in his last fight. Not struggles, but underwhelms, I guess, in his last fight. Like he won handily, but at the same time, you wanted him to sort of push the pedal more, especially given that he was on a knockout streak that ran for 4 years up until that fight. And then David Benavidez fights. Granted, Alexander Volsnik is no slouch and was up against Artur Beterbiev before Artur Beterbiev stopped him. But Alexander Volsnik, had some success in the David Benavidez fight. And David Benavidez, I think we both scored it like 8-4 for him. And we're kind of like, that's interesting there that he seemed to run out of gas a little bit at the end. So both guys with great records, obviously, but coming off of performances where you saw a little bit of a letdown. And I think that whoever wins this is going to be in prime position for a big fight after. But I think people may still have questions about them given what we saw beforehand.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most interesting factor of this fight is the fact that these two guys are fighting in their primes, Bryan. Like it's crazy to me that we're getting David Benavidez and David Morrell. This is arguably one of the biggest fights that we're possibly going to have this year. And I feel like it's kind of flying under the radar to, I guess, casual fans. Because if I was a casual fan, like this is a fight that I think could make me a bigger boxing fan because the card is good. David Benavidez, primed to possibly take over being the next Mexican superstar, even though he's Mexican American. I think it still kind of counts. And there's a lot riding on this fight. And then you take a look at David Morrell and, Cuban boxers, I feel like they kind of had a little bit of a run where people were saying they were fighting boring. They were kind of boring, but David Morrell's not that type of fighter. Like, he is a guy that possesses power and he could beat anybody in this division. That's how good David Morrell is. And to be honest with you, that's why I like the line for this fight because the monster isn't actually a massive favorite in this fight. And I like the line for it, Bryan. I think it's pretty fair. And, we already got one comment from our good friend Jesus. Jesus, thanks for rocking out with us tonight. Benavidez
Yes.
by TKO in the 11th round. We're going to get into our predictions, but Bryan, let's preview the fight first. How do you see this one going down?
I'm surprised you went to me first, but I mean, I shouldn't be because you often do. Honestly, I think we might have a slight disagreement here. For some reason, I think David Morrell gets this. And as I was just reviewing the film of each of their last couple of fights, there are some things that I think he can utilize to help him win, particularly the reach. If he boxes and kind of makes this, you mentioned Cuba style boxing, like to some has been boring as of late. I admire the style, but I get the issues with it. David Morrell is different. He's Cuba style with power. However, in this particular instance, I do think it would be beneficial for him to be a little bit more on the conservative side in terms of offensive output and sticking to counter punching, because that's where he's going to make his bread and butter, so to speak. David Benavidez is going to go for these uppercuts, these hooks. Obviously, he's going to try to hurt David Morrell to the body, slow him down. I think David Morrell needs to incorporate a healthy level of movement. A lot of things are going to be straight. He's going to try to hit David Benavidez in between some of these power shots, which is 1-1-2s and things of that nature. I think the straight left hand is going to be key for him, as is often the case for a southpaw against an orthodox fighter. And also, just he has a 4-inch reach advantage. And I think that's going to be sort of the big thing here. I expect him to be on the outside. And honestly, I think that can give David Benavidez some issues. Like, I do wonder, because you saw a little bit of that against Volsdik, but it's a different look because Volsdik, while he did have longer arms and was boxing some, Volsdik also is not the same style of fighter as David Morrell is. And I think people are sleeping on David Morrell a little bit. While, with David Benavidez, like, if you sort of look at it against Volsdik, I don't want to overstate that he struggled, but I did think he lost like 3-4 rounds in that fight. Demetrius Andrade, like, he destroyed him. But that was also somebody who was more effective, if we're being honest, at 154 and at 160. And the Caleb Plant one, which I thought was sort of the breakout performance, I thought that was probably a little bit closer than people expected. David Morrell comparatively hasn't had like that level of competition, but I think he's ready for it. He has the great amateur pedigree, as somebody mentioned in the comments, although they mentioned it in an unfavorable sort of way. But yeah, I really like, at least from a betting perspective, like, I don't mind taking a shot at David Morrell at all.
I think David Morrell has a very good chance to win this fight when you think about his counterpunching. I also like his jab a lot. I like his overhand right, but I also think he possesses a style that could be a little bit tricky for David Benavidez, because I feel like David Benavidez, we really see him get into a rhythm in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Like, that's when he kind of picks it up, and then it's like, whoa, like, there's no stopping him. You don't know what's going to happen. But in his last fight, that didn't happen against Vostek. And, there was that conversation. Did David Benavidez's power transcend to the next division? And I don't think we kind of saw it, but it was his first fight. So I'm not always going to harp on that first fight in a new weight class because it is a big jump. I want to see how he is in the second fight. And this is probably, Brian, I'm not going to lie to you. I think this is his toughest test yet.
Mm.
And we go and we look at experience, guys, and you look at the resume, and Benavidez has names on his resume, whereas David Morrell, great amateur experience. As you know, for Cuban boxers, it takes them a little bit longer because they usually start a little bit later, but he doesn't have the same experience that David Benavidez has. And I think that's going to be a factor in this fight. Also, conditioning. Like, there has been conversations in the past about David Benavidez's conditioning. So David Morrell, like, he's not a guy where I'm like, he's getting tired. David
Hmm.
Morrell's got that power. He's got that high IQ. The counterpunching is great. And I think he's going to be able to slip some jabs and some shots. But if David Benavidez can get to the body of David Morrell, there are some issues there, because we know David Benavidez is a great body puncher. This is going to be a crazy fight. And to be honest with you, Brian, when I was taking a look at this fight, I told you, like, I think you already had made your pick of who you were going to pick. For me, I actually I didn't pick a winner because this is a fight where I don't know who's going to win, you
People are
guys.
not gonna like that.
My bet for this fight is like not a sexy bet. And usually I'm always picking like a crazy bet. But to be honest with you, I really feel like this is like a 55-45 type of fight. Like, it could really go either way. I don't think this is going to be a knockout or a stoppage. I think this fight goes the distance. So that's where I'll be betting. It's a -225, not lots of value, but if you put it in a parlay with the rest of the card, you could get some money. I think this one goes the distance. I'm not picking a winner for this one because I think, honestly, it could go either way. And if you've watched this show, Brian, I've never not picked a winner.
Yeah,
I've
I think
never not
this
picked a winner, man.
might be a first for real. I mean, to me, I'm just gonna take the shot with David Morrell, um, plus 155, just straight up. Not that I think he's gonna stop David Benavidez, but given the trajectory, like you have to account for the power, right? And Dave Benavidez could get hit. I guess to me, Chantel, like I'm pretty consistent in this. When it's boxer versus puncher, I typically like the boxer. Not to say Dave Benavidez is not a good boxer or anything like that, but we know what he's coming in there to do. David Morrell, I feel like stylistically, like there's a pathway to him just scoring points and just getting to his jab early, getting to that straight left hand early, and particularly like just making it a problem for David Benavidez to sort of find that reach early on. Like he could steal the first 3 rounds, and then all of a sudden David Benavidez is behind the 8 ball, and then it's like, all right, he has to turn it on here. And David Morrell is increasing the sort of movement. Like he's not going to stand in there and trade with him willingly. I'll say this though, like he's not he's not like a defensive mastermind, so to speak, like maybe some Cuban style boxers are. Like if you look at his last fight, he was getting hit. Like he was getting hit in that fight with jabs. He was getting hit occasionally with uppercuts and things of that nature. Like his defense is not impeccable, but I think it could be good enough in this fight. The issue he's going to have is obviously with David Benavidez' hand speed, because Benavidez, I mean, the hand speed he has in this weight, and we saw flashes of it at his debut at 175 against Vosdick, but like that's something David Morrell is going to have to really account for. I don't think there's like a bad prediction you could make in this fight. Like that's the beauty of this fight in particular. I don't think
Yeah.
this is a fight where you could like completely just go off the wall, unless you say like somebody's going to win by a first round knockout, where I'm like, all right, like I don't know if that's going to
I
happen,
just don't
but
see that happening. You never know with boxing. Wait, did you make your pick? Did you say your pick?
yeah, David Morrell plus 155 money line. That's I will not place like a full unit on it, but I will make a small bet on David Morrell, and I'll look for live betting. Like this is a fight where you want to look for live betting
Hmm.
opportunities. Look at the feel out rounds, sort of assess how the first 2-3 rounds go, and go from there. Because if you do think like, let's say David Morrell wins the first couple of rounds because he's boxing effectively, but you see enough for David Benavidez where it's like, all right, he's actually hitting him to the body. He just needs to do it more consistently, and there are ways for him to do it. Yeah, you could look at that and be like, all right, there's value on David Benavidez now because this is closer to 50-50, according to the books. Now is about the time to put something down on David Benavidez. Or you can go the other way where like David Benavidez is throwing a lot in these first couple of rounds, and you're like, David Morrell still has a lot of energy, and all he needs to do is get more active, and there's a pathway to win here. So I think this fight is also going to provide some decent live betting opportunities for people who watch.
And if I had to make a bet, like if I really, really had to make a bet, and like I was like, I'm gonna take the fight going the distance, I think I would take David Benavidez to win by decision at plus 135. But I'm not like confident in that because I think David Morrell could very well win this by decision as well. I just don't see either of them getting knocked out. It's never happened before. And I just don't see it happening in this fight. And, we talk about David Benavidez, like he has skill too. I think people kind of sleep on his skill a little bit. And I really want to see if he got better from his last fight with Vosdick. So I'm betting on the fight going the distance. Brian's betting on David Morrell straight up on the money line. And if you guys are making me pick, like if you guys are like, yo, Shantelle, that's lame, I'm going to pick David Benavidez to win by decision, which is a plus 135. So some
Totally
value
fair.
there.
Yeah.
But I would kind of rock with him because I think the body punching, I think he's going to be stalking David Morrell in the ring. I think he's going to land some big shots. And if he's able to do that, I think the judges will probably gear towards him because it is Vegas. Like I'm just saying, you know what I mean? And also, I think the conversation with him and Canelo would still be there. I'm not saying that in a conspiracy theorist way, but let's get to some comments, Brian, really quickly before we move on to the next subject. Jesus is not feeling the card, y'all. He said the card is garbage. Jesus, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, and you can let us know why. Our good friend of the show as well, Nerd. Everyone keeps harping about Morrell's amateur experience, but truth be told, he lacks high-level experience. When it comes to the resume, Brian, like he doesn't have the names that David Benavidez has. Like, how do you think his experience is gonna? Well, I guess how do you think his experience will go in this fight against a guy like David Benavidez, who has been up against some solid names?
It depend like it's not a one size fits all thing as it pertains to amateur experience translating in the pros. Like This is something that I would say we see in the lightweight division now with Keyshawn Davis versus Andy Cruz. Andy Cruz, who would beat Keyshawn Davis consistently in the amateurs, but as a pro, while he does look good, Keyshawn Davis looks like he's on another level as a professional because it's a different style, and just the power and things of that nature. But then there are some examples of amateurs who have been highly, highly successful, and it's translated onto the pros where they became world champions and became one of the best in the world, like a Vasily Lomachenko. Shakur Stevenson has also had like an extensive amateur background where he medaled in the Olympics, and that's translated into the pros where he rose up very quickly. So it depends. With David Morrell, we're ultimately going to find out now because he is like stepping into by far the biggest challenge of his career. He's looked great leading up to this, and we're going to see what level he's ready for. So to be honest, nerd, like we're going to find out what side of the coin David Morrell fits at.
And you know what's crazy is that I really feel like people are kind of taking Morel on this fight too. Like I think people think David Benavidez might get
I
beat in this
don't.
fight.
I'm not
And
seeing that at all.
I know a few people, man, and I think more money will come on David Morel as the fight goes on. I think that there's a possibility we might see that, but we'll see what happens. It wouldn't be a shock. Ricardo Espinoza Morel to win by TKO in the 6th round. He's got real power, y'all. Like that's the thing. He's got the Cuban style, high IQ, and he's got the power. I mean, come on now. Let's go to our good friend Al the Pal. Andrade is another version of him, just more experience, more rounds, and he was a plus 190 fight night. Or I'm guessing you're talking about David Morrell.
No,
Mm,
I don't remember Andrade being plus 190 on fight night. I don't think it got that close. Andrade to me was like, that's a scenario where like going into it, you can kind of entertain it, but looking back, it's like he was most effective at 154, 160. Like David Morrell is a bigger dude. And I think at this stage of his career, this being the key, like he's at his prime or entering his prime. Whereas Demetrius was not necessarily there. Like the best level of Demetrius against David Benavidez, like maybe that's a different fight, but who knows? Jesus says Morrell can't go blow for blow with Benavidez, but you can see him outboxing Benavidez 8 rounds to clearly win by unanimous decision. I mean that's boxing. You don't need to go blow for blow with somebody to win. It just depends on what fight he's gonna fight. And I'm banking on David Morrell. Like I don't think he should try to go blow for blow with David Benavidez. I do not think he should do that. I think we would all acknowledge that if he does that, I mean, look, he has power, but that's not the fight you want to fight with David Benavidez. You want to try and box him. But ultimately, we'll see because he does have Cuban style with power. And if the power is strong enough to hurt David Benavidez, maybe he can go blow for blow with him. We're going to find out.
I mean, I think fans would love to see that. I would love to see them go blow for blow, but I think Morel is just way too skilled. The IQ is just too high for him to do something like that.